And we have Dr. Bob THIEL as a regular guest here on the program. He has been for years. And Dr. Bob is, of course, an amazing guy. He is not only a naturopath, but also an expert. He's written a book about the last pope. He's written books on many different, what I call geopolitical topics, but also from a biblical and an analytic point of view that are pretty stunning. He's had, top sales on Amazon for his book about Hillary Clinton, about the last pope, etc. So we're going to be talking about much of the latest events, including Donald Trump now being the nominee, and things are going to really heat up. You can expect the super PACs that support Hillary to spend up to $2 billion trying to attack him. You can expect Donald, who's a good counterpuncher, to go crazy with if she's going to attack him, he's going to come back, and it's going to get very vicious. We will probably have back on the program also Roger Stone, his book on Bill and Hillary Clinton's attack on women, and all the other issues that deal with the Benghazi, the corruption, the speeches to Goldman Sachs that are now sequestered and will not be released. Do we have Dr. Bob? Are you there?
Yes, I am, Dr. Bill. Hi.
Hi. Now, I'm sure I can tell the way you're just a tweak in your voice that you're chomping at the bit to tell us what your analysis is of the latest situation. We are sitting in a situation now where I think it's almost like I call a Job moment for Nineveh. Think of America as Nineveh, and the king of Nineveh has now got Job in front of him telling him what's going to happen to his nation, which, by the way, Nineveh was a big city. Back then, it was like a super city, 40 by 40 miles, I think is estimated the size of Nineveh, with a giant wall around it. I think that the fact that the king of Nineveh tore his clothes and repented in sackcloth and ashes delayed the judgment by 40 years. But I think that what we're dealing with right now is a pretty serious call to repentance by America, isn't it?
Well, it should be, but unfortunately, neither of the likely nominees believe in repentance, both on the Republican and the Democratic side.
Yeah, let's go through some of your analysis, because, again, I think that we're almost certainly going to be dealing with, despite Bernie Sanders, is huffing and puffing, the superdelegates, Hillary is going to be the candidate. Donald Trump is the candidate now on the Republican side, and you can dig up information about Trump over the past number of years. If you look at videos of 2, 5, 10 years ago, that is in contradiction to his current stance. And it's my feeling that Trump is really, at the moment, a conservative and will be a little what I call left of center, which means he's probably going to pivot on issues like deporting something like 10 million anchor babies with illegal immigrant parents. My guess is he's going to build a wall, but he's probably going to reach a compromise not only with Vicente Fox, former president, but he's also, he's pivoted on many different issues. And I think people in America, to be honest with you, agree more with the position of Donald Trump than they do even with Hillary. And they're going to get what they deserve, whether it's good or bad, aren't they?
Yeah, well, what's odd about, one of the many things that's very unusual about Mr. Trump, and you might recall Ted Cruz made a comment about Trump not too long ago. Basically what he said was, Donald will tell you something in the morning and assure you that it's true. Then Donald will, later that same day, will contradict it, say he didn't say it in the morning, even when you showed that he did. And so it's unusual. I've never seen anything like this, and I don't think any other living American has ever seen anything like this. We've never had a political campaign like this, and we've got not only what's going on with Donald, we've also got what's going on with Hillary. I'm going to read.
I still support Donald if you have a choice between
I understand.
Two. Yeah, but I can tell you, it's almost like Donald, I think, will do some good things and some bad. The idea of just putting tariffs up isn't going to fix the industrial export from America. You have to deal with the international financial system, which I don't know if he has the power. He certainly cannot deport people without the Supreme Court saying that these are not American citizens when they're born in America. And as I mentioned on the show yesterday, because we talked about this a few days ago with Tim Alexander, in China they have a 2-child policy. Now, if you try to have a third child, they will apprehend you like in an ambulance. They'll haul you off to the hospital. They'll abort you right up to the moment of delivery. They'll kill your baby, and they could sterilize you right on the spot. And you may, if you bleed to death or have complications, tough. What happens is the second child unless you're a senior member in the party, you do not get citizenship. So these women are often flying to America, to places like Chino, California, having their baby, is now an American citizen, and then when 15 years hence, when they go to university of spoiled children, because these people in the senior party are wealthy, they fly to LA, they become a university student, and they're an American. They're not a Chinese citizen, they're an American citizen living in Beijing or some other city. And this is a problem that the Supreme Court has to deal with. Are children born of illegals American citizens? And how do you technologically actually deport them? I think that there's things that Donald's promised he can't do even if he wanted to.
That I would fully agree with. But again, with this particular campaign, I'd like to read a headline about Hillary. This is from the left-leaning.
I want to change your name a little bit, Bob. I call her Hitlery. Hitlery Rotten, R-O-T-T-E, and not Rodham.
Yeah, well, my book is called Hillary Clinton, Prophecy to Destruction of the United States. I spelled her name the way she usually does.
I know, I'm just kidding around, but anyway, please continue.
All right, well, anyway, the Huffington Post yesterday, here's a headline. Hillary Clinton should concede to Bernie Sanders before the FBI reveals its findings. Now, this is from a left-leaning publication.
Wow.
Okay.
Now, who wrote that? What was the publication? Because,
Huffington Post.
Now, anybody else that had done what she does, which is to have a separate server, that, by the way, she paid for it with her separate foundation. The foundation was funded by people like Qatar and military people trying to buy weapons and get contracts with the government. So she's completely corrupt. I mean, if you actually went through a tab list of all the sources of money that were payouts that went to her foundation, it's like, this woman needs to be indicted so many times, it's just ridiculous.
Well, just on this particular point, let me just go through a couple of things that somebody else wrote. Again, this is a Democrat who wrote this, as far as I can tell, is what it sounds like.
Yeah.
Let me read you a few parts of this. So don't be certain Trump can't defeat Clinton in the general election, even if the FBI doesn't recommend indictments.
Right.
Because once he pivots toward being a semi-normal human being and distances himself from the bigoted stances he utilized to gain power within the GOP, Clinton would face a more likable Trump. In a battle of two individuals with negative favorability ratings, the person who might have jeopardized national security with a private server could easily lose. In the best case scenario, Clinton doesn't face indictments. Well, actually, in the best case scenario, I think she does, because he's a criminal.
Right.
But the FBI, this is again from the article, if the best case, she doesn't face indictments, but the FBI confirms that she jeopardized national security. See, this is what this Democrat is saying is the best case. He says,
right.
He says, thus Republicans would make even the best case scenario for Clinton campaign a major political liability. And they're going through explaining various things and why what she did was wrong. One of the things that,
Dr. Bob, we've got to insert this because it's important for, you may or may not know this. You know that 2 days ago, the DNC actually said that because of this impending indictment, they're ready to jump over Bernie Sanders and put Joe Biden in there and actually transfer all of her votes for the DNC, including the superdelegates, to this new candidate, which would be Joe Biden. They actually said this publicly. This is not my conjecture. This is what the DNC is saying.
I haven't seen that officially, but I will tell you.
Yeah, we have, actually. And the fact is the DNC are actually saying this 2 days ago.
Well, actually, 2 months ago in my office, one of my clients was saying to me that, and he's on some Republican committee over here, or he does some Republican things. He said that he and the source they had was that Obama will finally turn on Hillary, and it's going to be Biden. And he's
Obama can't turn on Hillary because Hillary has so much stuff on everybody in Washington. I call the District of Criminals. Nobody can cross her. The only people that can take her out is the FBI. And even if the FBI walks it backwards and says, well, we're not going to indict her, but she was, did put us in national security, even if she accidentally did. And by the way, it doesn't say that in the law. It says if you do anything that compromises national security, even accidentally, having a special server that was open to people that didn't have security clearance, like her so-called First Lady, Uma Abedin, her lesbian lover, we have a problem, people. And the fact is there's so much corruption going on. If they actually looked at all the contracts of people that were in contact with her that donated to the foundation, that got contracts for buying and selling things and building things for the U.S. government, or selling weapons or buying weapons, it's mind-boggling. I mean, She's beyond corrupt. I mean, she was fired from the Watergate scandal because the senior attorneys there said this woman is too corrupt to be involved in the investigation of Watergate.
That's right. As a matter of fact, that's in my, and you may have even seen that also in my book on Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
And what's interesting though about all this kind of stuff, you're looking at this, and one thing that's interesting about Donald Trump, of which, as you know, I'm not a fan. That being said, and we'll get to him a little bit later, he was blunt enough and honest enough to say, look, basically, I buy off politicians like Hillary Clinton. I give people like Hillary Clinton money because I need their political influence. Okay, now Hillary tries to act like, everybody just gives her money because they just love her and they just like her or her policies, and they don't really want her to do anything good for Wall Street, or they don't really want her to do anything good for the Chinese, or they don't really want her to do anything good for or for Donald Trump, for that matter. Okay, but I thought it was, Trump goes out and, if a politician went up and said, by the way, I took money from Donald Trump or whatever because I knew I needed, because they influenced me to do something.
Right.
The politician would go to jail. Instead, Hillary and others had said, when you get this money, it doesn't influence us at all. Oh, really? How come? I'll bet if I were to write a very large check to her campaign, I might even get to talk to her. You know what? I'll bet you if I don't write such a check, it's not likely that I'll ever get to talk to her. Okay? And the fact is that in our system, our moneyed greed system, if you will,
right,
money buys the ability to influence. Because you say, you mean buys the ability to influence? Well, if she doesn't talk to me or listen to me or read my books or other writings, I don't influence her. Okay?
Right.
But if I pay and I get to talk to her, at least she gets to hear my point, and she won't hear my point if I don't give her money.
People need to understand who Trump is and what he is. Trump has a touch of Asperger's. He's superior intelligence. He's a very high energy, as he tries to say, which means he's slightly hypomanic. He comes from a long line of very rich people who know how to be rich. And he's taken relatively small amounts of money and turned it into billions of dollars. He's even used the laws correctly 4 times to actually come out of bankruptcy, which, by the way, anybody in business can. And he knows how to make a deal, which means he can make America a deal. I think that he's evolved from the idea of being pro-choice many years ago to being pro-life. And if you were to take all the people that are rabidly pro-life now, most of the most pro-life people have been through the other side, including me. Now, so you need to understand that. And so we look at Donald Trump and when people want to criticize him and say this or that, he says bombastic statements that he pivots on them. For example, when we hear Lion Ted say these things about Donald saying one thing and saying another, he'll come up with a statement he really needs a speechwriter to say, do not open your mouth, like his wife, Melania, or his daughter, Ivanka, say, do not have a Twitter account, do not retweet, and check with us before you open your yap. So I think Donald is a person who's honest to a fault, and he's evolved into a person what I consider a little left of center, which means he can tell people like Caitlyn Jenner that he can use the bathrooms, but he also is pro-life. I really do believe that. And I also know that at the moment that Donald Trump is the only one that can pull America out of an economic chaos that will crush America and break it into sub-republics. That's going to happen real quick. Because either Bernie Sanders or Hillary gets in, it's the end of America. It won't exist 8 years from now if there's 2 terms. It won't. Well,
you mentioned Bernie Sanders, and for your listeners who are not certain of this, Bernie Sanders is a communist. Now, Bernie Sanders, he's running as a Democrat, but Hillary Clinton publicly questioned whether or not Bernie Sanders is a Democrat. He's been an independent. He was a part of the Socialist Party, and he was involved with the communists decades ago. That's not some conspiracy theory. That's simply documented. And beyond that, though, when you mentioned, if him or I presume or Hillary gets in, what's going to happen to the economy? In my book about Barack Obama, and also the one I wrote about Hillary Clinton, I quoted something from Pravda. Pravda is a Russian language publication, but they also put it out in English.
Right.
And what Pravda said is, look, the Obama administration, and at the time Hillary was part of it, is implementing the Communist Manifesto.
Right.
The problem is Americans are so stupid They don't know what communism is. They don't know what the Communist Manifesto really is about.
Right.
We Russians, we're communist. We know. We're looking at it. We're seeing what you guys are doing, and how we think you're being incredibly stupid.
Well, we are actually collective. I call Bernie Sanders the American Bolshevik. And remember, and this is both him and his I think his brother went to a kibbutzim in Israel. People need to understand that Israel was founded as a communist, atheistic country. It wasn't founded as a return of Israelites from ancient Torah Jews. No. It was founded as a communist, atheistic country. That's why the kibbutzim are complete. They have statues all over the place of Lenin. People need to understand this. And it later had collaboration with America, but to be honest with you, its initial founding, and again, this is in collaboration with the labor Zionists. We refer to Barry Chalmers in his books at lulu.com. You can see full integration also with the Nazis, who want to get them out of the state. And after the Second World War, they tried to recruit a lot of the remaining Jews that didn't starve to death or die in the concentration camps to come to Israel. But it was a communist state. It's still a totalitarian, if you want to call it, agnostic state. Although it has some Jews there that are ultra-Orthodox, and it has a lot of Arab Christians and some former Russians that became Christians through the Messianic Christian Society there in Dizengoff Circle in Tel Aviv. The fact is, the state of Israel, in a sense, its basic core is an atheistic state. People don't know that, do they?
Well, there's as far as most of the laws there's only one thing that they do there that suggests that they're not atheistic, in my opinion. I mean, yeah,
but they have the cover of it, and you know.
They do actually. Their business is shut down. Most of the business is shut down on the Sabbath, so you do see that over there. But beyond that,
I would add the word "ish." They're Jew-ish. In other words, they put the cover of Jew. But even our President Truman wouldn't authorize or sign the documents with the United Nations authorizing it to be a religious state, even though they want that cover. The fact is, the state of Israel is not a religious state, other than having a lot of very super religious people who won't be in the army, the ultra-Orthodox Jews, but they are very racist. For example, if there's senior Chinese engineers there that want to date an Israeli girl, the state does not look kindly on that at all. People have to understand what's going on in Israel. It's completely different.
It definitely functions primarily as a secular state. But getting back to what you were saying before,
right,
as far as the economy, we've got Mrs. Clinton and Mr. Sanders, who both, whether you want to call it socialist or communist, I think they're implementing the communist agenda, or attempting to do so. I mean, that's what's going on the Democrat side. Now, on the Republican side, with Donald Trump, you have kind of a different thing. Well, actually, before I go to them, let's just stick. When I listen to Bernie Sanders or Hillary Clinton speak, other than we're talking about the LGBT agenda, which I cannot believe how often Hillary decides she has to bring up, but she does all the time. Basically, what I hear from her and from Mr. Sanders is, listen, people, the reason you have a problem is that there are straight white men who somehow have rigged the system, and you're not doing well. Therefore, we're going to make it equal by taking from them and giving to you. They don't word it quite that way, but when they say, look, we're going to forgive your student debt, we're going to give you more health care, we're going to raise your wages, we're going to, et cetera. So they're promising them something from nothing. We're going to take from straight white men. Then you hear Donald Trump talk. Donald Trump basically says, look, the problem isn't straight white men. The problem is that we made bad deals with foreigners. We've not controlled our borders. And we're letting in terrorists in this country. And so the problem is all these foreigners. So we're going to set stuff up to try to deal with all this. It's kind of appealing to a different type of covetousness.
Welcome back. So let's summarize what you see as the current election cycle, because I see Donald Trump is a chameleon. I think that he will respond to the needs of the people. I do believe he is a conservative now. I believe he's learned, like most people as they get older, if they become wiser, and I believe he has a great family, and he has great relationships. As he says, my son does a good Donald Trumpism kind of speech, because there's certain words that are now become part of the lexicon.
Mm-hmm.
I think also he has to have a bit in him. In other words, people can't just let him go crazy. We need to be a force, not just one man. We need to be a force for repentance in America, for rationality. For example, when I make my statements, because I've had Roger Stone on the program, some of the things that Trump says about healthcare, I think they're a good, basically what I call transitional plan. But ultimately, we need to control costs, and what I've said on healthcare, and I'll see, and you're in healthcare as well. So, besides Donald Trump's plan, which I think actually makes sense in getting rid of Obamacare, Obamacare has three things that I find particularly noxious: death panels, number one, which are obscene; co-payments that make it impossible, so only about 5 to 10% of people can afford the co-payments for even normal procedures like surgeries or even conventional chemotherapy, which I don't agree with. But the second really bad thing about it is they have a chip actually that's actually scheduled to be put in all Americans by 2018. And the third is what I call some very noxious ICD-9 codes. One of the worst of is that they actually have an ICD-9 code or treatment code with the guillotine as a treatment. Now, taking your head off isn't exactly a therapeutic procedure, but it's actually in the ICD-9 code for Obamacare. Obamacare basically, and I was told this by a Lockheed Martin scientist in October of 1998, who, after I did my talk at the Catherine Coleman Church in South Denver, about my experiences working at U.S. Space Command Strategic Events Star Wars and working with the FBI and CDC in radiological and biological terrorism. And the talk I did was called Iridium Mark of the Beast. And I'm going to say this is not a boast but a fact, but I know more about the actual virtual world project called the Matrix and the Mark of the Beast than any other individual who's ever drawn breath or had a pulse. And I will be putting out a book, a booklet this year of what we call Part 1 of my information. People need to know I actually got the documents right from Lockheed Martin. And one of the most important things he said is, you cannot bring in this mark in America, which is the center point for the mark, not Brussels or Beijing, unless you bring in some form of totalitarian healthcare system. That's what we have, that Hillary tried to for decades. And they brought it under Obama with total collaboration with the Republicans. The Republicans didn't do anything, which is why the current rage that's actually put as nominee Donald Trump is primarily because the Republicans are part of the corruption I call the District of Criminals, two sides of the same snake. And this system basically means that and I got someone on the weekend that sent this to my wife, Michelle, that they actually have a chairs where they ask you health questions and they scan your chip in your hand or arm. It's literally in Walmart stores in America already. I mean, they already have this now. I mean, we're not making this up. And people need to understand that the chip is part of the Obamacare plan. In about a year and a half, they plan on having it in all Americans. So people think, well, we're just speculating. We don't need to be prophets anymore. We just need to be reporters. So this is ugly. And when when Trump says he's going to pull it, he knows a lot more. For example, when I heard his talk talking about anti-missile systems and theater air defense, how many people do you think know about theater air defense or U.S. missile command defense and all the layers of anti-missile systems we have, including our high-intensity particle beam weapons that we now have deployed across America? Almost none. So when I heard him knowing this, I know that Trump knows a heck of a lot more about classified stuff than he's saying. He's a lot more intelligent, but he can't talk. And the thing is, he's a salesman, number one, so you see him schmoozing and twisting the words, which, obviously he's going to pivot on these things now that he's no longer fighting other Republicans. But we need to maintain control of this guy. We can't just let him go crazy and do what he wants to do with inadequate evidence or information, or think he can make boastful statements like he's going to deport all these Mexicans. What are you going to deport all the Chinese that are at USC and so on that are American citizens because their parents had them born here? I mean, what are you going to do with all the other people that arrived here from other countries, including Europe, that basically the child was born here but the parents are Irish or Scottish or German or whatever? What are you going to do?
Well, one of the issues that he's got, and I know this is a short segment.
Yeah, we're kind of going to break again.
I'll have to wait till we get back to the other side.
I finished my rant. Now you'll have the chance when we come back.
All right.
But I think we need to make sure that when I send my healthcare policies off to Roger Stone, we need to maintain some control of this guy. Yeah, he's a good leader, but we're the one they're leading. Now that I finished my rant, let's talk about some of these issues, because a lot of time we can't say absolute answers, but we can say one thing. Trump, in his discussions as a GOP candidate, is going to be quite different than him as the attack dog against the vileness of Hillary and her husband, and the establishment, which are both Republican and Democrat. And it also means he's going to have to pivot on issues where he really doesn't have any power to do things, like deporting people that are, quote, American citizens by the anchor baby rule. And I've listened and gotten actual opinions from attorneys who have stated on the one hand that these are American citizens, and on the other hand, they say they're not. Well, if it's not decided by the Supreme Court, no matter what President Trump wants to do, it can't be done. On the other hand, we need to have a wall to stop lots of illegals and OTMs, Syrian and other terrorists who want to do things, because Obama and Hillary want terrorism on American soil because they want a bipartisan domestic security bill to take more of our rights, like Patriot Act 1 and Patriot Act 2, which is brought across in pieces, because the globalist maniacs want to dilute the culture, like in Europe and America. They want open borders because they don't want a nation state. And they want to make sure that they crush our personal liberty, so we have to show our papers, please, and have a tracker chip either in our cell phone or biometric identification like iris and visual scans of our bones with a terahertz scan, which can be put up on a telephone pole and can scan your bones, even go in a car at 70 miles an hour. People don't know that the terahertz scan can identify you more accurately at a distance than anything else. It's the same kind of waves they have in these airports. So I distrust government in general, and even with people like Trump, he has to have a choke chain in him to make sure that he doesn't get away with stuff that, he's a good salesman, so he might sell you stuff, and then all of a sudden you got to realize, that was a bad idea. So we have to make sure we are cautious. How's that?
Well, I think that's one thing Mr. Trump needs to try to do is become more cautious in some of the things he says.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think it should be run by Ivanka, his daughter, who I think has probably more social smarts than he does.
That may well be, but as it turns out, he's the one who's running, and we'll see what he does.
Yeah.
He's made a variety of statements that have concerned people. I'm not as concerned about him wanting to have Muslims vetted before they come to the country. I think that's smart. I'm not as concerned.
In other words, it's a good idea. First off, they actually took over the 2 printing presses for Syrian passports when they took over these territories, ISIS, which, by the way, we supported militarily and through satellite phones, etc. And so when they came through Mexico, they were actually coming through with valid-looking Syrian passports. So what we have is hundreds of cells in America that if they get the command, they're going to do major terrorism. And I expect before the elections in November that under the watch of Obama, we're going to have his 9/11 event, and he's going to get a domestic security bill with Mitch McConnell and the Republicans, and Paul Ryan will actually fully back. And God help, our rights are out the window, and they may even delay or even obviate or prevent the elections, because the establishment cannot stand. We're not just talking about America, we're talking about the global establishment cannot stand the appearance of this faulted man, Donald Trump. He's not perfect by any means, but he is scaring the bejesus out of the establishment and the globalists.
Well, he certainly has upset people around the world. The Europeans are upset with various things he said. The problem is not that some of what he's saying isn't correct in that particular part. He basically says that the Europeans have been living off the U.S. defending them. They've got the money. They should be paying more.
Absolutely. I mean, how ridiculous is it that Europe has this giant economy? And by the way, their total population, without even talking about all the Turks that are not a member of the Euro, there are already like 400 million people there, and they have giant economy with all kinds of high tech. Why are we spending this giant budget for NATO, which, by the way, doesn't incorporate terrorism? And so when Trump actually has a capacity to actually focus on problems clearer than anybody else I know in modern history, which is part of the reason why he's getting ahead.
Well, anyway, it's not that Trump doesn't have any points on some of what he says about Europe. The problem is that he's offending Europeans, and what they're starting to figure out...
How is he offending them? I want to know that, because, to be honest with you, although he's bombastic, I don't see him as a misogynist hating women. I don't see him hating Hispanics. I don't see him hating blacks. I don't see how they can be offended. I mean, I think it's what's going on. And listen, I get our RSS feed analysis every day. You know the nation that follows us and has the most listeners? It's Germans. They're right after America, literally not much farther behind America, listening to our RSS feed audio podcasts all over the world, because we have it in every single audio podcast bridge that you can think of, or register it's called. Germans. because they know they're experiencing the evil of Angela Merkel, who've now had, and the number of Muslims that have been moved into their country that are just going crazy. Like we went over on Tuesday with a map from Tim Alexander on his site, and we have it up on video as well, that the map of rapes and sexual molestation in Germany is freaking crazy. And the Germans are intelligent people. They've been relatively passive. They're beaten down by all this stuff about the Holocaust. And they're tolerating this Christian Democratic Party, Merkel, who've just ripped the guts out of the country. So I don't see Germans as at all, or Europeans as at all, insulted by America. So all this is hoo-ha generated by globalists who want to pretend that there's some form of insult. I don't see... I see that right after this, for example, what's going on, there's more division in the Democratic than the Republican Party. I guarantee you that there'll be a position somewhere in government for Ted Cruz or for Marco Rubio and these other characters like Kasich, that he will mend things up, mend fences. He will not do the same things he's bombastically said. He'll pivot on them to what he can do because he's actually an organizer and he'll take advice from his advisors. So what I see happening is when people try to pretend that he somehow insulted Europeans, how? I don't see it. I don't see it at all. I think it's ridiculous that people say he insults Mexicans or they calls them rapists. Yeah, there's a percentage of Mexicans, 37%, this is a fact, of all felonies, federal felonies in America are illegal aliens. That's a fact. It doesn't matter whether people want to hear that fact or not. 37% of all federal felonies in America are illegal aliens. That's not good. And even if it's only 1 or 2 or 5%, you can't have an unvetted group of people coming in. You want rapid immigration. In fact, I've said, and I get lost customers, where I said, we need to stop thinking, and this is before I get converted to the idea with Joel Skousen about the wall. We need to realize that we need bottled watered and air-conditioned buses so people don't die in the desert, starving or free or dehydrating. In fact, we have ministries here in San Diego, because I know them, that actually go out in the desert and put bottled water and other food supplies so that people don't starve to death or dehydrate and die out in the desert. And a lot of people do, trying to cross that desert from Mexico into San Diego County. So, when I hear all this stuff about Donald Trump and how he's insulting Europeans, it's ridiculous. It's not based on any facts whatsoever. And the same way with Mexicans or anybody. And I guarantee you, when he makes a deal with not Vicente Fox, but the current guy, they'll have a collaborative, who's going to build the wall, who's going to pay for it. It'll be a collaboration. It won't be, we're going to make you pay for the wall. I mean, come on, Donald. He should say one thing because he's a marketer. The fact is he's going to work out a deal, the master of the deal, right?
Well, that's what he calls himself.
He is. He'll make a deal that'll put, we need to do a wall, but guess what? What he says to the people in New Hampshire, he's going to stop the illegal heroin coming in. I took care of an employee who was, because I had security clearance at presidential level, who was taking care of the pilots flying in the Black Hawk helicopters and the Hercules C-130s at Aurora Air Force Base in the 90s. And one guy called me and was in a panic. He was actually suicidal, so I had to go back to the office and see him. And he told me in great detail how the Hercules C-130 that came in from a war theater was loaded to the gunnels on shrink-wrap pallets of heroin. Our military is bringing the damn stuff back, okay? And our CIA and the FBI and the Department of Injustice are all collaborating, and the $2 trillion goes into budgets that are not overseen by Congress and the Senate or the President. It's a need-to-know basis, and it builds underground cities, off-world space platforms, and all kinds of weird science that's scary as hell. And what people need to know about this, because I'm a whistleblower from the inside, and I know more about more classified projects and talk publicly about this than any other individual in modern history. That's the facts. And what's going on is he's not only building the wall, he's got to stop the damn CIA and the FBI and the Department of Injustice from bringing in the drugs and destroying the inner cities and building underground cities with the money because it's not overseen by Congress and the Senate. That's the facts. So he has a lot more to learn. In fact, I mentioned this on the interview with Roger Stone, that he's going to have not little cans like bean cans, the size you can put on your table. He's going to have oil barrel sized cans of worms when he's going to open this stuff up. That Donald Trump's going to be in a state of shock when he actually sees how evil and how corrupt our government is.
Well, I do believe if he does become president, he's going to find that the government can't work certain ways he hopes it does.
Oh, absolutely. He's going to get a reality check when he gets they come to Jesus talk with all the security guys that start revealing things. And remember, a lot of stuff happening on things like even Area 51 and other areas of off-world or Tier 1 space or science projects. Eisenhower warned us that this is going to happen, that the military-industrial intelligence complex was going to take over. And since the assassination of John F. Kennedy, we've been under the control of the CIA and globalist intelligence agencies. We haven't had a real presidency. They've been sock puppets for the intelligence agency, including the spook family behind Obama. His entire family are spooks. In fact, it's been well documented that he was a agent for the CIA while he was supposedly going to Columbia University. And in fact, Barack Obama is a manufactured entity. His entire family are spooky. So people need to know that the spooks, since the assassination of JFK, have taken over and had a coup d'etat. And Roger Stone collaborates that and others. Amazing, hey?
I haven't looked into those subjects the way you have, and I've
lived them. Let me tell you, that's why I'm enraged about all this stuff, because I have had so many death threats and other things happen to me. And I come back, because the reason people say, well, why don't they kill you, Deagle? I said, because they do. You might believe. Out there. So you get to know out there, when you're listening to my program, you see me a little bit kind of interrupting my guests or going crazy. I am so frightened by what I see happening and the level of ignorance, including among the so-called alternative media. It's disgusting. It's dangerous. It's collectively putting us in risk of a thermonuclear war with Russia, which doesn't need to happen, and China. We're in an economic phase right now where any day they could pop the bubble that the government's created for the banking bubble that they've actually physically made, like they made the housing bubble. They actually, with government regulations, created that bubble. And,
correct.
We're in a big pre-disaster move here. And I think, 9/11 was bad enough, but remember, as the ex-examiner of the Murrah building, when the agent came to me and said, I want you to check me out for radiation. And when they found out, they court-martialed him because he had a loose tongue at a bar near Fort Carson. I got hauled into the boardroom of St. Francis Hospital with Major Schwinder and the board and the president there of the corporation, and they fired me on the spot and gave me death threats. And I countered and said, give me a check for $50,000, a letter of reference, and if you come near me or my family, I got friends in the Delta and Special Ops, and I'll take you out because I know where you sleep. And I said that, and I got the check and letter the next day. People need to know who the hell Dr. Deagle is. Okay? They need to know this is not open to their damned opinion. I mean, I lived through hell and still live through hell. I remember 3 years ago I started getting death threats from all over the place, literally every hour of the day and night, my family, everybody, all the way from Texas to Delaware. And I said, hey, I got techie friends, I tracked down your IP address, I got the local authorities coming to get you, which I did. And I said, if you're stupid enough to come through my gate, in my gated community up in the mountains outside Vista, California, I'm a crack shot, I can turn a wire at 30 yards, and I train with the Marines over at Pendleton Marine Corps Base, and I'll blow your head off before you say hello. And guess what? All the death threats immediately stopped. And when I say that periodically, people say, oh my, Dr. Deagle's a doctor and he'll help people and make them well, but do not cross or threaten to kill him or his family because you're going to die fast. Like that movie Die Hard, you're going to die real hard. And people need to know that, the same way we need to make sure that Trump doesn't get away with stuff. If Hillary gets in, God help us. People have no idea how evil it'll be if either Hillary or Bernie Sanders gets in. Trump, he's still like a tornado. You got to control this guy. I mean, obviously, even his daughter and wife are frightened of his mouth.
Well, as far as what's going on in the U.S., I have a slightly, a very variety of different takes, but as far as this particular election, I think we have a choice between someone who I believe is criminal, which is Mrs. Clinton.
Yeah, Mrs. Clinton,
and someone whose morals and adultery and whatever I have issues with. And as far as I'm concerned, the only solution is the kingdom of God. I see both of these people as in violation of everything Scripture talks about. I mean, it's just, like, for example, 2 Samuel 2, verse 3 says, he who rules over men must be just, ruling in the fear of God. I don't see that Mrs. Clinton, Bernie Sanders, or Donald Trump meet that. I also see it says those who are supposed to rule are supposed to hate covetousness. And we've got all three of those people are amongst the most publicly covetous people I've ever seen running for office.
Oh, I listen, I know he's a faulted man, but I can tell you, what we need right now to resurrect America as a business is a businessman. And we need to also know that he's gone through an evolution in terms of being a believer. I personally, and this is a fact, I cannot find a church in America because this place is so apostate to go publicly to. I would cause so much trouble just asking questions of the pastorate in a church that I can't find one. So it's not surprising to me that someone comes up with a pat answer about what's your favorite scripture and so on with Donald Trump. I know he's a Christian. I know he's become pro-life, but certainly he wasn't before. But how many people that are pro-life now were pro-choice on the other side? Let me tell you, I can give you a list of abortionists, women who have had abortion, people who've gone through hell. Even the lady who's
I'm not challenging the fact that you repented on abortion. I think that's great. I think
right. But what I'm saying is, I
think that's good.
I think Donald Trump is a Christian. I don't think he's a great Christian. I don't think he's an evangelist by any means. I think he has a great family because he doesn't drink, he doesn't do all drugs. He has a solid family, which means the man must have some principles, even if he's a quote good businessman.
He seems to have a fairly solid family.
I think also that this is another principle I think we need to do. There are righteous people that are rich. When Jesus said to the rich man, sell all your things and then follow me. The reason is because he put his riches first. I think when Donald Trump did this thing, especially running for the election, he lost so much money. Not only paying for the election.
He's lost money in business.
Not only that, you know what they've done in Canada? Listen to this. You got to listen to this. In Canada, these crazy Canadians, let me tell you, this country in Canada North is so friggin' red and so disgusting. And I lived there many years, okay? I was born in Detroit, but I lived there for the first half of my life almost. I can tell you it's so red that they got councilwomen in Vancouver that want to take his name off his own tower, Trump Towers in Vancouver. They've literally done the same thing in Toronto, Ontario. They wanted to excoriate him in every possible way, saying he's disrespecting the lesbian, gay, whatever. And then he tells Caitlyn Jenner, hey, come on down and use the bathrooms in our place. So when they make all these statements against him, saying he hates women, guess what? Most of his corporations are run by his family, including his daughter, are women. Okay, so when they say he hates women, they're nuts. When they say he hates Hispanics and other people, he makes business deals in all these countries. Everything they say about the man is crackers. He's not a great Christian, and I don't believe he's necessarily covetous. He's saying, hey, I can't help you if I don't have more. The fact that he had the money to actually fund his own campaign, didn't have to kiss the butt of the media and all these other people, that's great. If we didn't have a billionaire in there, he couldn't afford to actually run against the establishment. That's the facts. With all the billions behind him. Welcome back. So we differ on that view about Donald Trump. I think Trump is like a lot of Americans. They don't have what we call like a Catholic view of repentance, where you go to the priest and you say your prayers, or you go to God and say, God, I screwed up and forgive me. To be honest with you, the most important thing in forgiveness is not to continue sinning, because the only sin is against God. You can't sin against man or nature or anything. You can do evil, but you can only sin in what. Basically, my approach to repentance is in some ways distantly, but it's similar to Trump, which is, I know I've screwed up against you, God, but I'm going to try to do better next time. And I don't see him as a great Christian. I see him as a superficial Christian, but he's a Christian. Just like a lot of Americans are Presbyterians, which is what he claims to be. But I see he has the evidence of the fruit of a good Christian. He's a non-drinker, non-drug user, solid family, good business relationships, which means if he screwed up over and over again and was dishonest with himself and the people he does business with, he wouldn't be as successful.
Your listeners don't understand what we were talking about before. We didn't discuss this when we were online. Just if you don't mind, bring up your listeners.
Right.
Disagreed with Dr. Bill on Donald Trump being a Christian, because Donald Trump basically said he's never repented. He doesn't bring God into the picture if he does something wrong. And I think I think that's a biblical issue. So
I think part of the problem is that Donald Trump is not what I call a par excellence communicator. He makes statements that when CRUZ tries to say he twists it and says a different thing at night, I think it's because for example, let's say when they had all these hypotheticals with Chris Matthews about abortion, he said, well, we should punish the woman. Then 10 seconds later, he corrects himself. Donald Trump's mouth runs faster than his brain. And I don't think that if you actually got him in a situation dealing with, why he became pro-life and he used to be pro-choice because he said it on public media, you'd see a person that's what I call an average Christian, but he happens to be rich, who tries to be a good person and doesn't necessarily go down on his knees or face down like some people, Christians, do, to actually repent before God before they say, I'm going to change my behavior. He just tries to change his behavior. So I don't see him as a great Christian, but he's a Christian. And again, remember, probably 90% of the Christians in America are just like Donald Trump. They're not what we call face down, praying before God in tongues and self-flagellation and fasting for days because they've done something bad. Trump just gets himself dusted off and just moves forward. Now, I don't think he's great, And that's why he needs to have people like his own wife and daughter managing him, and the public, like Roger Stone advising him. Hey, you need to stay on track. When we're talking about defunding, for example, Planned Parenthood, we need to talk about fixing our borders. We also need a good immigration policy, which is basically held up. Newt Gingrich put it out 10 years ago, and the immigration acts needs to improve so we can bring properly vetted people here. We need workers. But I think you're going to see the evidence that if we need to pray for the man, because if we want him to be a better Christian, we need to actually be an evidence.
Whatever leaders we get, we should pray for. That's for sure.
Right. We need to pray for him to become a better Christian. Remember, most of the people in America, and this is really pretty obscene, but when I've traveled, because I traveled around the country to cities all over America and Canada on pro-life issues, I get the phone slammed in my ear so many times by people that didn't even want to hear the issue pro-life. I can tell you, most Christians in this country are apostate. And if Trump is coming out of,
I agree with that.
And if Trump is coming out of apostasy, pray for the man, because if he's our leader, God help us. If he slides backwards.